Hello everybody, welcome back. Welcome to those who join me for the first time, and certainly welcome all of you who follow me. I appreciate it very, very much. Today I'm going to do a little bit of a recap because I have been reading your comments and I thought it would be a good idea perhaps to address some of them. Some I have already replied directly, but I think sometimes you also by the ones that send me emails. By the way, my email is interpretingtradition@gmail.com. Okay, so you can send me emails there. I think you have some of you bring up very, very interesting comments, things to actually talk about, and answering in writing may not be the best way. So I thought, why don't I address some of these issues that you bring up? By the way, thank you very much for the helping me and encouraging me in the subscribers thing. I think it went up a little bit and now it's beginning to descend again. I hope it won't go back to 639, but anyway, let's hope. Okay, so addressing some of your comments. Mary from Australia, you say, thank you for your podcast. I can see the hurt you feel at seeing our beloved church going downhill. I too feel as much. When is the Pope and the other princes of the church, I guess, going to become soldiers of Christ? Always praying for this to happen. God bless you, Mary from Australia. Yes, Mary, thank you very much for your comment. I think that the soldiers of Christ thing has unfortunately within the official church has actually been given up. I mean, their motto, as I said in another video, seems to be never judge and never convert. But there are many soldiers of Christ there, and I will come back to this point. We remember the covenant that Jesus made in the Last Supper with his apostles, and I covered this in another video, which I titled, Is the Pope Breaking the Covenant? This is about a week ago or so. And some of you, perhaps most of you, have seen it, but I'm just going to go over it very quickly. And that is to remind you that the in classical times, before Christianity even, and you can see it in the classical literature, in Virgil, in Cicero, in Ovid, and also of course in the Old Testament, that when the leaders of two tribes or two nations wanted an alliance or a pact or an agreement with each other, the way to do it was always in blood. Okay, the blood is an important thing here. They would split an animal in two, split, blood all over, and then they would walk between the two parts of the split animal, and they would walk together, swearing on oath that they would keep the promise of whatever that allegiance or that pact was. And this you can find in the Old Testament too. Now, that splitting of the animal gave way or evolved into the breaking of bread. So I did explain in that other video that the breaking of bread, Jesus breaking bread in the Last Supper with the apostles, was not to say we are friends together, let's share a meal together, a meal together, which is our understanding of breaking bread. We break bread, we are friends. No, the original meaning was that you have a pact, you have an agreement, you have an alliance, and both parties agree to it. And the apostles knew what it meant, the breaking of the bread. I will do this for you, the the cross, the sacrifice, the crucifixion. But you go and spread this teaching to the four corners of the world. They knew it was a pact. Now, the Catholic Church is not doing that. As a matter of fact, it's going in the opposite direction. Is creating a sort of, under this Pope, a sort of a world religion. You can see it in the thing in Abu Dhabi and so on. So that is not happening at the present time. But there are soldiers of Christ, and I'm going to go off on a limb here and tell you what I think. And it may be a little bit off, you may think it's a little bit wild, but let me tell you what I think. I am optimistic, actually, because things will probably get worse before they get better. I say this because this present Pope appointed 80 bishop cardinals, the ones that are going to vote on who the next Pope is. Benedict, there are only about 30 appointed by Benedict the 16th and only about 11 by John Paul II. So in American terms, he has packed the court. Okay, now it could be that even though these cardinals were appointed by him, that they will be true to their conscience, or perhaps if they, that is, if they are truly believers. But if they are infiltrators, obviously that is not going to happen. So we don't know what is going to happen. In other words, the next Pope could be even worse, could be the one just going for it and putting the final nail, he would think, on the coffin. But I don't think that that can happen. I don't think that that is going to happen. I think that there will be a rebirth of the church. Perhaps we had to come down to this level in order for the church to be born again. And I think that, and this has happened before in the history of the church, you know, every 400 years or so, it just seems that everything is destroyed and then it has to be born again out of the ashes. Okay, it's not going to disappear. But I tell you what I think. I think this resurgence, this rebirth is actually going to come, of all places, from America. I really do think so. There are many parallels. There is the decline of the empire at the moment that we are witnessing in America. Yeah, think about the Roman Empire. It was happening at the same time. It is also the place where all these, do we call them woke? I don't know what to call them anymore. This new woke way of looking at things, men, women, all these crazy ideas are coming from. It was the same in Rome. Okay, is the perversion of society almost to an extreme point, and there you see the rebirth of Christianity. And I do think America, the United States, is actually the place where active traditional Catholicism is at its most vibrant. It is not happening in the old European countries. It is happening there. You only need look at all these wonderful people with all these wonderful videos, traditional Catholics, about keeping us up to date of what is happening. You can see these seminaries for young priests there, the Society of Saint Peter the 10th. I don't know very much what is the difference, because I had been out of the church for so long. I don't know the differences between the society, the SSPX, and the fraternity, something or other. I don't know what's going on there. But in any case, I see some videos of seminaries and seminarists, young men, so behaving so beautifully and so traditionally in church with so much reverence. I think that is where the future is in the United States. It will, of course, the Vatican will be the Vatican in Rome, but it just seems that this is where the Catholic Church is going to get its rebirth. And who knows, perhaps in 400 years again, when everything gets depraved again, and it will be in another empire, it could be that it just has to be it's not going to happen, I don't think, in the traditional Catholic countries. So there are soldiers of Christ there that are trying very, very hard, and I think they will succeed. Okay, that is all right. Let me go to the next comment. Hannah, you say, thank you so much. I appreciate your perspective. Would you be willing to share your thoughts on obedience in relation to the current state of the church and the destruction of the liturgy? Yes. I think I answered directly, but in order to talk about obedience, I want to read a little bit more, go back and think about it and so on, because I want to do it well. I just don't want to talk of at the top of my head. But the obvious answer there is that is why I want to think about it more, because the obvious answer is always, when you're talking about obedience, well, there are rules that you cannot follow. If a general, the usual example, if a general asks you to kill all these children here, well, you shouldn't obey the order, and so on. Okay, all that. But I don't want, that is an obvious answer. I want to go a little bit deeper than this. And the three things that come to my mind, and I said I will deal with this a little bit more in depth, but the three things that come to my mind is, first of all, obedience is a very good exercise on humility, and that is why it is a virtue, as it were, because sometimes it's obvious. If someone orders you to kill children, you know it's wrong, but sometimes it's not that obvious, and it's more nuanced. So if because you have more expertise than your boss, for example, on how things should be done, your boss is a bad example. Let's keep it within the church. That your bishop is telling you to do something that from your own experience in your parish that perhaps is not the best way. It would be better to do it this other way. You are required to, with humility, put out your point of view. But if he insists, you are to obey. That's an exercise in humility, because it's difficult. Yes, of course, we are talking here about well-formed consciences. So if the bishop in this case then realized that you had been right and he had been wrong, he would have to acknowledge that too. Okay, so first is a good exercise in humility, and I'm going to see how different founders and different saints dealt with it. The other thing about obedience, remember that in Catholicism we deal with duties, not so much with rights. Keep that in mind. And also it is a hierarchical organization. That is not okay. In order to prevent as much as possible subjectivity, if you are to be left to decide for yourself without any reference to your superiors, you might get, you may start going in the wrong way, because you might start just convincing yourself or trusting yourself a little bit too much, and that leads to subjective opinions, and that could, so in other words, you're supposed to present it to your superior. And so the hierarchy, humility, duty, so there's a lot to think about here. Obedience is difficult. All right. As to the destruction of the liturgy, in the playlists you will see that I have, this is way back, 2-3 months ago, that I read my translation of a book written by the Spanish mystic of the 16th century. And I read the whole book in different, I think there are about 16 videos or something like that, of my own translation into English from that book. You might, if you want to know more about the traditional liturgy, I would ask you to listen to those videos. The only thing is that I'm reading, and it can be a little bit tedious and sort of, boring, because I'm just reading, I'm not talking. But if you really want to know, and you get into it, if you're just listening, then you will just switch it off. But if you really get into it and listen to them carefully, you will see what a tremendous knowledge and understanding, and what a gem that book is about the explaining absolutely everything about what is going on in the Mass. I found it absolutely fascinating. The destruction of the liturgy, if I were to destroy the Catholic Church or Christianity, I would go straight for its center, obviously, and that is the Trinity. And that is why I don't know, because I don't go to the Novus Ordo Mass, I don't know exactly what they do, but I would be very surprised, because the liturgy was changed by especially Cardinal Bonini, a Freemason, that he would have left all the prayers to the Trinity there. Because you see, the three persons, the three of them acted in the incarnation. Only the second, the Son, incarnated. Now, if you take away the Trinity, if you take away the Son, for example, if you're just left with, let's say, the Father, there are a lot of religions that have the Father or one God, okay? You don't need to be Christian to believe in there is one divine being, or whatever you want to call it. We call it the Father. Now they're changing it to, well, it could be the Mother, it could be Spirit, so nothing it. But in any ways, just the Father, the idea of a God. There are many religions that share that. The Holy Spirit is a little bit tricky, because sometimes it is confused with, and I have seen it, with my feelings, how I feel. I think the Holy Spirit has filled me with this, and really what I'm saying is my own subjective reactions, feelings, and so on. This is typical of many fake mystics, false mysticism. Okay, and it is I know a little bit about the mystics because I have translated them, I have lived with them, and this is one of the it's very easy to detect a true mystic from a false one. By a true mystic, I'm talking about there are certain people that have been touched, let's say, by God in a special way. And the way they talk and they write about it is always, they forget themselves, is always, the emphasis is always on God. When it is false mysticism, you will see that it is about me, how I feel, It's very easy to detect. So if you just have the Holy Spirit, your understanding of it could lead you in along the wrong path. The thing here is the divinity of Christ. Okay, and that is as the Son. I would doubt that in the Novus Ordo there are many references to the Trinity. They took away a lot of the prayers before, during, and after the consecration. We know for a fact now that because of all the research and so on that has been done, that the second prayer of consecration, that is the one chosen most often by priests because it's the shortest, that was written in a pizzeria in just that's it. Okay. But there were lots of prayers before, during consecration, and after the consecration. After the consecration, because even though it had been consecrated already, you were still asking the Father to accept it, to accept that sacrifice, and so on. All that has been done away. About the Trinity, I know that, for example, the Kyrie, which was repeated 9 times, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, and so on. The Agnus Dei, all that was repeated 3 times, meaning the Trinity was taken out, and they just say it once. And the logic is, well, once, I mean, why do you need to say things 3 times? Yeah. It's not that they didn't understand the people who changed the liturgy. It's not that they didn't understand their meaning. They knew the meaning. That is why they took it out. But I will deal with the issue of obedience, which is difficult. I'll see. Okay, there's the Pepe. Hello. You say, thank you for your reply. The church being infiltrated from within is evil. What else can it be, really? My daughters and I are going to Valencia for a few days soon. I'm hoping to soak up some culture and some spiritual inspiration. Do you think I may find it? Oh, probably not. But okay, let me tell you. Okay, yes, I was born in Spain, but I left. I haven't lived in Spain for 55 years. Okay, so I'm not the one to tell you what you're going to find, but I did go back in 2005 and stayed for a number of years, not very many. And I came back to England because I didn't feel my way. I felt very much like a foreigner in my own country. I knew when I went after 50 years that of course everything would be very different. I knew that. But I found that the people had changed too. I found many things. I wasn't there to judge. I just felt very much like a foreigner, so I came back. So I'm always an outsider everywhere because because here in England, although I lived here for so long, and in America I lived there for 20 years, whenever I open my mouth and say, "How are you?" they say, "Oh, where are you from?" So you're always reminded that you are an outsider. I feel very, very comfortable like that, actually, because I like solitude. I find that I don't know why I'm a little bit different. It could what we are all different, but I have my own differences, and I abhor to be in crowds and things like that. So I always look at life from a distance, kind of. Anyway, so I am an outsider now. However, when I went back to Spain, I went to live in Avila, and this is next door to Madrid, in the center of Spain. And when I say Avila, some of you will recognize the name Saint Teresa of Avila. I was there at the Catholic University, right next door to the convent that the Reformed convent. Next door to it. It's not a very big place. It's a very tiny, sort of medieval-looking town with beautiful, beautiful walls around it. Look it up on Google, the walls of Avila. Anyway, the Reformed convent was outside the walls, and I was practically at the university next to it, like 5 minutes walk. The original convent where she was, I know I want to talk about Valencia, but let me just say this. The original convent where she was is within the walls in the actual city, where the cathedral is, and so on. I had come to the church, reverted to the church, because I abandoned the church for a long, long time. Not out of rebellion, not really. I never rebelled. If you ask me when I was totally out of it, if you said the Catholic Church is in trouble and it needs a savior, I would have come there, the first one. So it wasn't rebellion. It was just that I had come after my schooling days and so on. I came to England and everything changed, and I just sort of stopped going to mass for some reason. And I don't know, you just, one day you don't go, then the other, and then that's it. And let me tell you this story. Actually, I've never told this story before. How I came, before I go back to the Spanish thing. Oh, my mind is okay. I had left the church for a very long time, and when I came back from the United States one day to Oxford, one day I was walking along this road, which I had walked as a student 1,000,000 times. I mean, it was just, I lived up that road, so I walked it to come to town many, many times. But this one particular time, I saw a Catholic church there. this is about 20 years ago. I had lived in the United States for 20 years, and I came back to Oxford. So I see this Catholic church, and I said, oh my goodness, there's a Catholic church here. It drew my attention. I said, oh, Catholic church. So they built a Catholic church? Oh. So I actually went inside. It was a Catholic church. I hadn't been for a while, I thought. And I went inside, and I genuflected, and it was, Mass had been celebrated there not long before, because if you go, I don't know about the Novus Ordo, but in the Mass, after the Mass has been celebrated and everyone has left, there is a warmth there. There is a something there that is very attractive, very homely, and I felt this warmth there, so I knelt down, and everything was very, very familiar to me. And it had been like 30 years, 25 years that I hadn't been to a church. And but it felt very, very familiar. So I felt like home. When you go back to your home, the home of your childhood or something, and you see the old chair or something, it felt very, very comfortable to me. And then I started thinking, oh my goodness, I think I have to come to Mass. I mean, I haven't been to Mass for a while. And then I thought about it, and I thought, it's probably 25 or 30 years. Okay. So when I left the church, it was because I came to England, and all that was in 1967. So that was before all the changes to the liturgy. I didn't leave the church because of the changes. Many people left, drifted out. They say about 80% of Catholics. That was not my case. My case was that I had drifted away before, and I had no idea whatsoever that these changes had taken place. I remember an old aunt of mine saying, many years ago, they changed the Mass and now it's done in the vernacular. And I said, that is all I knew, some sort of something there at the back of my mind. So I was not aware of any changes at all. And then as I come out of the church, I look at the notice board there, and it says, on Sundays, High Mass. I didn't know what High Mass meant. I thought perhaps it means the Missa Cantata, something like that. And then the Novus Ordo something, and I what is this Novus Ordo? I had absolutely no idea about what had happened. And when I went on Sunday, it was the very first time that I had been to Mass for a long, long, long time. And the first thing I notice, and I'm getting a little bit confused. Well, the first thing is that the priest is facing us. And everything is done in English. And then I remember my aunt saying, so why is he looking this way? And I thought that it was because that the English always want to be different to everybody else. So I thought this is probably the way the English do it, Anyway, long story short, I then started to learn about all the different changes to the liturgy and so on. But this was the Oratorians in Oxford who did both at the time, the Tridentine Mass and the Novus Ordo Mass. And the Novus Ordo was done actually very, very well, with a great reverence and so on. Okay. so I didn't feel assaulted. But then I left for France, and I was able to go to the old mass, and then I left for stay there for a while, and then I went to Spain, and I couldn't find one. I couldn't find one traditional mass anywhere. As a matter of fact, it was rather sad, because there in Avila I went to the cathedral and I saw all the changes that the European Union had. Well, they influenced it. What happened was that the European Union said to the church, practically, they needed obviously money to repair and refurbish and so on, and they gave them grants with the caveat that they would have to allow people in as a museum. But what about the sacrament? Of course, that was well, you can put it there in a corner somewhere, but let just be a museum. And so what I saw was people walking about, taking photographs, and I said, oh my gosh, in a church? I was coming from the old tradition. I left. I just couldn't stand it. I tried to go to mass someplace, and I had to practically run away and escape. I just couldn't go. I just couldn't. I felt it was an insult, actually. I felt as if you're, there mocking Christ to the cross. That is how I felt. I escaped. I just couldn't. Anyway, so why am I telling you this? I don't know. Valencia. So I don't know what you're going to find. Spain is a kind of weird country. It is a country of extremes. It's because of our history and culture and all kinds of things. Okay, each country has its own idiosyncrasies, and in Spain is very much black or white, and we have very little patience with those who with grace, yes or no kind of thing, life or death. As the in one film they said that about Spain. But in any case, what I'm saying that Valencia is a very modern city. You might find the two extremes. Okay, you might find the worst, or you might be lucky and find the very best. Look it up. Look at, if you... I don't know exactly what you mean by spiritual, what do you say, spiritual inspiration. If you're talking about the Mass, look it up to see if it's done in some place there. The culture, however, is Catholic. I mean, you can't get out of it. It doesn't mean that they're good Catholics, but the culture, the way of dealing with life is still very Catholic. So I don't know. Perhaps you can be more specific, and I could give you some pointers if you send me an email. I could again at interpretingtradition@gmail.com. I could perhaps advise you, because I stayed there for about 4 or 5 years, and I traveled because of my business. I traveled all over Spain. I can tell you perhaps the places to visit. It's most peculiar. You will, oh my gosh, I'm driving all over Spain because of the work I'm doing. Suddenly I'm driving, okay, and I see Torquemada. I say, what? Torquemada? Is that the Torquemada from the Inquisition? And I turn, and yeah, it's a little tiny one-horse village thing. You have the church and you have the nothing else, one road and nothing else. I went inside the church and there was a priest there, and I said, "Is this Torquemada from Torquemada?" Yes, this is where in Spain you will find these things all over the place. I was driving from Avila down south, and I found and I saw Alcántara, Saint Peter of Alcántara, who's I don't know whether you've heard of him. He's very much venerated in Spain. He was the spiritual director to Saint Teresa of Avila, and he was like Don Quixote. The poor man he used to walk. Now that takes about an hour and a half drive. People in those days just walked, obviously, so it would take days, I suppose. But he was so emaciated that Teresa used to say that he looked as if he was made out of the roots of trees. That's how bad he looked. Fontivero also, not very far from Avila, St. John of the Cross place. And I went there once, again, another little town and so on. And I wanted to talk to the people there. I saw a little statue of St. John of the Cross right in the center square. And I went into this tavern, this bar thing where you can have food, and I wanted to talk to the local people there, because they were obviously, just your regular humble folk, peasants and whatever. And I talked to this man and I said, "So this is the home place of St. John of the Cross?" And he was very proud. He said, "Oh yes, he's from there." He said, "He's famous all over the world, he is." He said, "His house is just down there, down the road." His house is now a little museum thing, okay? But he was saying, his house is just down the road. And I knew that he probably hadn't read his poetry and so on, but I just wanted to hear him talk. And I said, well, he was a great poet, wasn't he? I mean, not only a mystic, but his poetry. And the poor man was looking at me and he said, "Yes, he's famous all over." He couldn't get out of he's famous the local boy, famous all over the world. I couldn't get more out of him. He's really famous. But the little statue was actually, it was not the government, it was not the council, it was ordinary peasants in the 1920s who put their few pesetas together and actually with their own money built up this little statue. So wherever you go in Spain, you see so much history, like in all countries, I suppose, in Europe. But there's, if you care to send me an email, perhaps you can be a little bit more specific. Another one. This mystic that I translated, he would celebrate Mass every day at a convent in Madrid of cloistered nuns. I know this from his biography and so on. So I actually look for it, and it's still there. And I went in and I spoke to, there in the front room. And I told them, I explained, I said, look, I am translating this mystic who I know used to celebrate here, Mass here. He was a Franciscan. He used to come here and celebrate. And they walked me into the church, a beautiful church. And there was this connection with time. This priest had celebrated Mass there, and I was translating him like 500 years later. And I thought, and I asked the sister, I said, is this how we would have been, the church and the altar and everything? I mean, or has there been a fire and the church has been refurbished and so on. And she said, well, I would have to check, but we don't know of any. No, the church has not been redone or refurbished or reconstructed. No, we have no knowledge of any fire. I will check. She said, no, but this is the church. It has always been like that. So there I was, looking at the altar where my guy, I call him my guy, used to celebrate Mass there 500 years ago. It really shakes you a little bit, you know. Anyway, all right, moving right along. On the other video, the previous video on the young, I have something about the young and how we were formed, educated differently. I'm not going to be able to read this. Sorry. I'm 30 and at a crossroads in my life regarding education, work, etc. This video encouraged me to dare to take opportunities I haven't dared to see or take before, maybe because they seem scary sometimes. The unknown is scary. I will dare to see opportunities around me and also in myself now. Thank you. Yes, you know, the difference with me is that in my situation, I had to look after myself. We all had to. So you learn how to survive. And when you learn how to survive at the age of 5, you're not going to be scared. In other words, you almost expect it. You know, you get up in the morning and say, okay, what problems will I have today that I have to sort out? I am being a little bit facetious, but it's just that we were formed to have to deal with situations and with the unknown from the age of 5, as I told you. So this is not difficult for me to do that, but I understand that in a safer, let's say, context, that you were brought up by caring parents who try to soften the path for you and so on. And that has obviously its good side, but also the fact that your survival skills are not fully developed. You know, I heard one of those billionaires, I think Sir Richard Branson, I think, the Virgin guy, in an interview, I believe it was him, he said that when he was 4 years of age, his father, I hope it's him, but it was one of these billionaires, his father took him to the forest or to some woods somewhere and left him there for him to survive, for him to come back home. Now, probably now that is considered abuse. But a child, I don't suppose it was a huge forest in the Amazon, but probably scary enough, but not too difficult for the child to find his way home. When you go through one of those experiences in childhood, it shapes you. You're not scared. You're not scared. You're able to deal with that situation. Don't be scared. It's what can possibly happen to you? I think, what is the possible worst thing that could happen to me? Well, I think of my daughters. If something happened to them, I don't know how I would deal with them, but I think I would survive it. In terms of me, myself, what can possibly happen to me? The worst thing, that I die? Yeah, so? No. I just I just don't find it within myself to be scared about anything, but I realize that it is because of the way I was brought up. So I wouldn't attempt to advise anybody about their own life. If you were brought up differently, obviously your personality is going to be different. Don't be scared. Things always look very much more difficult and very much more scary when you look at them from afar. The moment you start dealing with the problem, you will find that you can solve it. Especially women. Sometimes when we go through the usual problems, perhaps divorce and children's problems, and we look back, how could I have possibly managed? If it was now, I wouldn't have been able to do it, but I somehow you dealt with it at the time. So that is what happens. It's always more scary when you're looking at it. Once you go into it, the moment you start doing it, piece of cake. Okay. But good luck and keep in touch anyway. Yeah. I just love this channel. You're so right about finding your way. I have tried telling my children there is more than one way. Yes, from B to A. Sometimes you may have to go a roundabout in order to get there. Okay. My daughter, age 18, needs to feel part of a crowd. Seems afraid of breaking rules. I wonder what has happened. How can I help you get more subscribers? Oh, so interesting. I don't know. Well, if you can help in any way, go ahead and do so. Yes, I think the millennials, the so-called millennials, are the very last ones who might remember to survive by themselves. They still remember a world where, even though we already had computers and to a large extent cell phones, they were not so much part of our lives. So they still remember having to work hard, merit, getting there, and so on. The next generation, I think it's partly due to technology. I'll have to deal with this in another video because this is running too long. But it is there is a marked sense that they are very fragile, and we know they feel insulted, they feel this and so on. They cannot cope, and I'm going to keep my thought because I'll deal with it again. I'm going to think about it and see what I can come up with. Okay, I'm going to leave it for today. I'm going to put 2 videos down below in the links. I hope you can watch them. Perhaps you have seen them already. One is the Remnant TV, Michael Matt, I think his name is. And he's talking, well, they're actually both talking about the same thing in different ways. One is from a Catholic perspective. The other one is the LaRouche Organization. They're talking about what is happening in the world today. You might find them interesting. And that's it. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.